on this poster. It's the name of our conference, Connecting with the Culture. So we have two presentations in this session, and the first is from Akrivi Katifori from Emotive Project.
Hi. First of all, I'm very glad to be here in this very interesting conference. How can I... Okay. So just to say, I'm here on behalf of my of the research project Emotive, which is a project that focuses on designing experiences for visiting cultural sites, and also on behalf of my group in Greece, Athens. We are a multidisciplinary group within Emotive and within my group in Athena Research Center. We are computer scientists mainly, but also we have in our group and external collaborators several museum curators and experienced designers for museums and archaeological sites in general. So I'm here to bring in this conference a somewhat different perspective than the talks we heard so far, trying to approach the connecting with culture theme. I'm going to talk, to present our perspective for the past around 9 to 10 years in 3 different research, let's say, projects. Starting with CHESS, which was another EU-funded project on digital storytelling. Then our work with NARALive tools, which is our work within the Athena Research Center, and now with a project Emotive that is finishing. So I will present the work in digital storytelling for museums within this project from the perspective of web connectivity, and how it affected our design and technology so far. So starting with CHESS. CHESS was a 3-year project starting 2011. It was our first connection and approach with digital storytelling, cultural heritage. We approach digital storytelling as a story-centric experience for the visitor. The exhibits are not mere objects. They are placed in the context they were used and presented through the people that use them. Within the project, we developed branching narratives which were personalized. This means that we identified different visitor personas. This means user archetypes with different needs in terms of the content they would like in the museum. And we created a system where a server located in our research, in our university, was communicating with the mobile devices given to the visitors within the museum, and offered content in a personalized and adaptive manner. This means that as the visitors went in the museum, their initial profile was identified. They were given, they were proposed a specific experience, and then during the experience, the content was offered to them based on their previous choices. We worked in the Acropolis Museum of Athens. There we managed to evaluate our prototypes with more than 50 visitors during the duration of the project. What were the issues we encountered? Initially, thinking that we are working with the Acropolis Museum, which is one of the biggest museums in Athens. It's recently renovated with what we thought would be a very sufficient infrastructure in terms of network. In our case, it proved that although our evaluation showed that we, in fact, achieved our purpose to provoke curiosity to the visitors, create a sense of wonder for the exhibits, and foster an engagement, we had very important problems with the infrastructure in the museum. The Wi-Fi connection was unreliable and unstable. There was a big problem at cases because the experience was breaking for the user. And this compromised our evaluation activities. Of course, the museum would not easily accept any effort on our part to update the infrastructure and make it more resilient, as it would cause problems with the decoration of the space and the architecture as it had been designed. So we had to adjust our technology to be able to run our evaluation smoothly. We pre-downloaded in the devices all the heavier multimedia assets, and the network was used only to decide, for the storytelling engine, to decide which would be the next part of the content that the user would experience. This solved up to an extent the issues that we had, but not completely. This meant that the technology and experiences we created, although as in their concept they were very effective for the visitor, they could not be deployed as they were in the museum. So the project finished, and we were thinking what we could do about it. We felt that since this museum and others we visited, which were supposedly the most advanced in infrastructure, were not working with our approach, we completely redesigned our approach. We created a lightweight web-based authoring tool which produces native Android experiences which can be pre-downloaded on the visitor mobile devices. In this case, the Wi-Fi is only needed to download the experience in the visitor phone, and then the visitor can use the experience without any interruptions coming from the network. Using this technology, we ran several experiments at the beginning of the Emotive project in the ancient Agora of Athens, which is a big archaeological site, and we managed to create an experience which is now available to download at Play Store in English and Greek. For another museum in Athens, in the Plaka area, the History Museum of the University of Athens. What was our conclusion in terms of our technology and the network needs? We created a stable solution, seamless visitor experience. We used it to create several digital storytelling experiences in many different sites. Most of them are working prototypes, let's say in beta version. Some of them can be further updated a little bit in terms of production and content and actually be deployed on the sites. The main issue we face in these cases is how the visitors can download this content in their devices, because they would either use Wi-Fi, which in the case of the Agora is not available at the whole archaeological site, only in the museum, or they would have to use their mobile 4G connections, which for tourists is sometimes prohibitive, because they would have to pay a lot of money to actually be able to download the app. And in this case, we're talking about simple, let's say, experiences. We dropped the adaptation, we dropped personalization. There are single user experiences, one phone working by itself. So what happens if we want to do more complex things? And what happens if we want to do more complex things in a remote site like the Çatalhöyük Neolithic site in Turkey? This is a very a big site, archaeological site. It's still an active excavation. It's a 9,000-year-old Neolithic site. It has been excavated for more than 60 years, and it has been found that in the past it occupied, it had more than 8,000 people living in this town, this Neolithic town. With a very interesting social hierarchy and organization. So this site at the moment is not, it's accessible by tourists. It has a visitor center, but the infrastructure there, even for the archaeologists, is less than basic. There is some Wi-Fi, but it's not working even for the experts who are working there when the excavation is open. So we couldn't really hope to be able to do something complex with the network there for the visitors. So what was the experience we designed and tested there within Emotive? We worked towards their collaborative experiences, meaning bringing visitors together to explore the digital storytelling concept and have them talk to each other, engage in a meaningful dialogue on the site, based on specific pre-designed interaction points, as we call them. So the visitors follow the experience themselves in the app, as we did before, but at specific points they are asked to exchange information and discuss based on what they have heard so far. An example of an experience we deployed and tested on site was a multi-component group experience for two or three visitors visiting together. The first step is for the visitors to create a role through a personality quiz. They are assigned a role like storyteller, hunter, or such other role in the Neolithic site. Then they can select from some objects from the site which are relevant to the role. They get a 3D printed artifact which they can personalize in different ways and make it their own. And then they proceed in the site, walking through reconstructed houses that have been built in the site to show how the houses were. And they are involved in an experience where they are asked to trade these objects between them and understand a little bit how this community worked in terms of sharing. Once they finish with this mobile experience on site, they have the possibility to have like a post experience where they can engage in discussion between them, which is facilitated by a chatbot. So what is the actual requirements of this experience in terms of network infrastructure? The first, the second, and the first part, the personality quiz, then the object selection, and then the part where they converse with the bot, they require at the moment network connection to work, a good stable connection. So in this case, we cannot really deploy this experience on site, although it is otherwise mature enough to be deployed there. So when we ran the evaluation, we used a 4G connection and the unstable Wi-Fi connection for these parts which needed the Wi-Fi. And in this particular experience, we used one mobile phone per group, because this is the way the experience was designed. But what happens in cases where people have their own device? How can we handle this synchronization if there is no reliable network infrastructure? We face this problem not in faraway Çatalhöyük, but in the Minster Cathedral of York. It is the second biggest cathedral in the UK and a very important site. It is still used for religious purposes. It is an active church. There is no Wi-Fi infrastructure there whatsoever. So again, we had to work with what we had. This means we had individual devices for each user with the pre-downloaded content, and we devised ways within the experience to ensure that these people were at the same time looking at the same thing within the experience. This experience is designed for groups of 6 to 8 visitors, including a facilitator, which is more or less like a guide, a little bit explaining and showing the group how should they proceed with the experience. So we ran a pilot evaluation of this experience with 25 visitors. We are currently analyzing the results, but they are very promising. The people were really engaged in meaningful conversation in the site and really understood and reflected on the concepts that were presented and connected with the story of the site. So we see great potential for visitor engagement and reflection. However, this experience produced obvious technical requirements for synchronized content to appear on the devices. We had no guarantee that the visitors would keep looking at what they should and not move forward in the experience. Also, there was the need for the facilitator to be able to control the way the experience unravels in the phones of the visitors and somehow control the narrative based on what they were discussing. And also, an example of an activity that came out as a need was for the users to be able to decide together by voting or polling through their devices. So we are again going back to our initial ideas on how to ensure the synchronization with these devices without some kind of server and network connection there. We briefly discussed again to move to our initial architecture of having a server to handle this synchronization, but then especially in the Mister, how would this work without any type of network present? So we are currently looking at solutions to be able to connect the devices without the presence of any network. There are some frameworks out there. We had to look a lot for them because, of course, nobody's working very diligently in these things because everybody assumes there is Wi-Fi. So why should we bother to design stable technological solutions for the mobile phones to create their own network and be able to make this type of games or experiences? So our best candidate so far is this nearby connections framework. But the truth is we are currently trying to develop a working prototype with it, so we don't have an answer if it will be working for us or not. So my conclusion from this almost 10-year experience is that we cannot really rely on the Wi-Fi if we want to create stable visitor experiences with mobile devices in cultural heritage sites. On the other hand, these kind of experiences that we are designing are indeed very powerful and have great potential to connect the visitors with cultural heritage. So we need stable technological solutions to be able to continue to test and evaluate them. And we are investigating these ways until true web connectivity is there. So thank you very much. If you have any questions.
Okay,
Any questions to our speaker?
Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Steven Krauer from Clarin project, working with speech and language processing tools.
Okay, thank you. Well, after this very fascinating talk, you will see that mine is much more down to earth, because it's about an infrastructure and not about the exciting things that you could do with it. But still, I think it's worthwhile presenting this infrastructure, which is called Clarin, which stands for the Language Resources and Technology Infrastructure. My home base, my name is Steven Krauwer, my home base is Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and I work for Clarin EaPEC, which is the organization that is in charge of Clarin. Okay, now I'll describe you very, very briefly Clarin in, well, here it says 8, but actually it's 9 bullets. Because it's not because I had too much Armenian cognac to drink, but just because I added a bullet without changing the title. Clarin is, as I said, the Common Language Resource and Technology Infrastructure. We have a formal status in ESFRI, which is the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructures, since 2012. We've been appointed landmark, which is some special let's say, title for well-established infrastructures that have been around for a while. We provide easy and sustainable access for scholars in the humanities and social sciences to digital language data in all sorts of forms, written data, spoken data, video, or multimodal, or whatever. And in addition, advanced tools to discover, explore, exploit, annotate, analyze, or whatever, do with them what you want. And we want to make sure that you can use both the data and the tools independent of the place where the data, the tools, and yourself are located. So you can use everything from everywhere. We want to offer single sign-on access, which is very similar to let's say, EduRoam, where you just sign in with your institution credentials. And this Clarin should serve not only as a repository of data, but also as an ecosystem for knowledge sharing between researchers, between the infrastructure and the customers. And we are strongly committed to the FAIR principles. They've already been mentioned today several times, I think. And we are ready for integration in the EOSC, the European Open Science Hub. And now FAIR, well, most of you will, maybe all of you will know that FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I'm sure that even if you have never heard of them before, you will probably agree with me that these are very important requirements if you want to store data and if you want to make it accessible and usable in the long run. The second thing is the European Open Science Cloud, which is one of, let's say, a vision developed by the European Union about the creation of one single space for researchers where they can collaborate, where they can share the data. But fortunately I saw that the next talk will be about the EOSC Hub, so I will not tell you more about it. I'm sure that the next talk will reveal everything. Now, if you look at Clarin EaPEC, as I said, the EaPEC is the organizing body. The Clarin EaPEC is a consortium of 20 member countries. And well, I've listed them here, and you can see them in the picture. We have 4 observer countries, that are countries that want to join but are not there yet. And altogether, sorry, we have some 50 centers subdivided into, well, centers that provide data and tools, centers that provide metadata, and knowledge centers that provide knowledge and support. As you will see, we have expanded to the west. We have one center in the US. To the south, we have a center in South Africa. But as you see, our horizon towards the east is very, very close. I mean, Armenia is not even on the map yet. And I hope that we can make it happen, that this will change. That on our next map, both Armenia and maybe other countries from this area will be included. Now, What do we provide? Well, this is probably can't even read it, but this is a very global overview of the sort of things that we provide. We have the Clarion portal. That's our main access point to the whole infrastructure. We offer depositing services where you can deposit for your data for a longer term. We have what we call the Virtual Language Observatory, which is basically a catalog giving you access to I think around 1 million data items spread all over Europe and the world. We give you easy access to protected resources because very often the resources are not, let's say, publicly accessible because they are protected, for example, because they contain private data or data that can not be shared for ethical reasons. So, but through Clarion you can get access to those data. We offer the Language Resource Switchboard, which is a facility whereby you can really combine data from one center with tools from another center, and then with yet other data from yet another center to make them work together. We have virtual collections, which is a way to, if you have collected a number of data items from several parts of the world, you can, let's say, save the whole query so that you can use it in one go next time you want to get access to all these data, and so that you can share this with your colleagues who might want to work further on the data you worked on, or who might want to replicate your experiments in case they don't really trust you. We offer the Language Resources Inventory. It's for people can deposit or submit descriptions of pieces of data and also data themselves that they have come across. We have content search, which is the Virtual Language Conservatory gives you access to all the metadata, and from there maybe with links to the data. The content search allows you to do search in the data, so that you because the content search, let's say the metadata search will allow you to, let's say, retrieve all items that were in the description Armenia is mentioned, but the content search will give you access to all documents that are in the collections where Armenia appears as inside the document. It's a prototype because not all centers are connected to this yet, but it's something under development. And the last thing is just sort of help desk. If you have questions, you can ask, and you can approach us and ask them to us. Now, examples, just a few examples of data types in Clarion. What sort of things you find? Well, we have newspaper archives, literary text, social media data, parliamentary records, historical documents, manuscript, oral history data, disciplinary libraries, institutional archival data, speech and video recordings, sign language recordings, broadcast archives, etc., etc. A lot. This is just to give you an idea, because many people think when you talk about data just about old manuscripts or so, but it's a lot of different things. Now, language is very important. Language plays many roles in our lives, in our daily lives. And here I've just listed a number of roles that you can think of. Carrier of cultural content, record of the past, main communication instrument within and across societies, preserving and disseminating our knowledge, instrument to formulate rules for society, carrier of information, means of human expression, focus of cognitive processes, the component of our national or cultural identity, object of study, and object of computer processing. And now, for each of these roles, we see corresponding audiences, people who might want to use, or groups or communities who might want to make use of the Clarion facilities for their own purposes. And I'm not going to enumerate them all, because as you see, all of the roles that I mentioned on the previous slide have now one or two communities connected to it that would like to, or that we hope would like to make use of our services. Now the link with culture. Because out of these bullets, there are a few that are directly connected to culture, because that's where I would like to make the link between, let's say, Clarion and this event, because one of the topics of this event is culture. Because carrier of cultural content, much of our cultural heritage is encoded or described in language. It's a record of the past. It's carrier of information and entertainment, let's say movies, media, and journalism, means of human expression. Well, think of literary studies, poetry, art, psychology, and component of our national or cultural identity, which is, I think, a very important thing in, let's say, new emerging countries. So you see there is a very clear link between what Clarion offers, and the culture. But as you see, there are also areas that we cover that are not part of culture, that are really totally different field. Let's say objective computer processing. If you think about language and speech technology, making translation systems, speech recognition systems, etc. Now, why I'm here? And by here, I do not mean on this earth. I mean here in Yerevan today. Well, basically, first reason was because I was invited, and I was very glad to receive this invitation, because I really love being here and listening to your talks and enjoying a bit of the city. Well, let me repeat from the first slide that the Clarion infrastructure wants to provide access to scholars in the humanities and social sciences to digital language data and advanced tools. Now, and if you think about this, I think the fact that we are here in the Matena Daran, I don't know how you pronounce it. I asked the taxi driver, but I couldn't figure it out. But I'm sure you know what I mean. This provides an excellent example of the sort of services that Clarion would very much like to offer. Because I read on the website of this institute that it's the world's largest repository of Armenian manuscripts. Part of it has been or is being digitized. And we know that Armenians and scholars interested in Armenian language and culture are spread all over the world. And then wouldn't it be great if this growing digital collection could be accessible for all scholars, together with the tools to work with that? And I think that this is a point where I would say, well, if this is what people want, if people here want, Clarion would be very, very happy to collaborate to make this happen. And I know that it's not just the data that is collected here. And the correspondence, Raj told me that, that his institute is working on the collection of yet another type of data. And I'm sure there is more. I checked the Clarion catalog. Well, you can't read it, but I found only 64 Armenian items in the catalog that we have that contains 1 million items. This is a bit modest, and I think we should really try to improve that. And I'm sure it can be improved. So I hope that in, let's say, 1 or 2 years' time, it will not be 64, but 64,000 or so. Some nice number. Now, more generally about collaboration, I said we would very much like to collaborate with this institute and other institutes both in Armenia, but also in the neighboring countries, because I'm sure they are very much in the same situation. They're not yet on the radar of Clarion, and I think they deserve to be there. But we would very much like to establish collaboration with these countries. And we also want to facilitate cross-border collaboration in research and education, because basically what we do is we provide access to data and tools, but of course what we want to achieve is that people use the data and tools to do research. And where we think that we should use the opportunity that Clarion is a Europe-wide endeavor, that we would like to encourage cross-border collaboration, not just people within one country working on a specific topic, but do it across borders. And I think that thanks to the fact that we have Géant, because Clarion is to a large extent dependent on Géant. If Géant didn't exist, we couldn't exist either. But the fact that Géant is covering so many countries worldwide, this is an excellent opportunity to expand our services and our collaborations towards all these other countries. And one of the things, special instrument that we're using, both for, I think mainly for educational reasons, but also to stimulate collaboration, is what we call the Clarion resource families. These are collections of similar data that are likely to exist in all languages and that can be used to do collaborative, comparative or contrastive research, and also training across languages, countries and disciplines. And I'll mention a few examples on the next slide. And I think let's say, collaboration would also work on methods and tools, because we know from experience that if a specific tool or method has been developed for one language, it takes less effort to, let's say, port it to another language. I'm not saying that it's always trivial, but between some languages it's easier than between others. My favorite example is always between the German language, which are our neighbors, and the Dutch language. The languages are very similar, and from my experience I know that many tools that work for German can easily be adapted in order to make sure that they cover the Dutch language. Now, the example of the resources families that we are now we're creating collections of these data, and one is computer-mediated communication corpora, which is social media and that sort of things, historical corpora, second language learner corpora, literary corpora, newspaper corpora, parallel corpora, manually annotated corpora, parliamentary corpora, and spoken corpora. And more on this you can find on our website. Now, to conclude, Clarion is an infrastructure, as I told you, focused on language in all its manifestations. It serves a very broad range of audiences belonging to very different disciplines, not just linguists, as many people think. We want to give access to all relevant data and tools, including yours, and we invite interested parties in CE and or EaPEC and other countries to collaborate with us. And please, if you're interested, you will talk to me, you send me an email, or just contact Clarion, and they will also be happy to help you. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you for the interesting presentation, and thank you that you spent some time in order to investigate what it means Matena Daran, the manuscript museum which we are now. So thank you very much for the interesting presentation, and thank you very much that you spent some time in order to investigate what it means Matena Daran, what kind of manuscripts do we have. But also we prepared for your visit. We had several meetings with different organizations, and we prepared small proposal in order to be involved later on in the Clarion activities. And we will give it to you, and perhaps we may have some small meeting tomorrow in order to prepare some discussions, and to prepare some actions plan. So we are also a lot interested to be a part of the Clarion family. And it is the draft proposal.
I'm very, very glad to hear this. It's very good to have a success 2 minutes after you finish your talk. This is great, thank you. We will discuss it further.
Can I ask a question? Really very interesting. Sure, we will look the site and know more about Clarion. But could you say about principles of organization? It is a language which is using forms, text. What are input? What are output of this language? Okay, for example, if someone like to bring into the computer some data, for example, in some languages, what have to be the form of this? Because language is a very complicated thing. So say a few words before. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, basically I think we are interested in data in all possible formats. But of course, we cannot guarantee that for all the formats in which people deliver their data, we will have tools to process them. And that's the reason why we are very much focusing on, let's say, adoption of standards, not formal standards, not like ISO standards, but de facto standards in communities, so that we can be sure that if people all, let's say, use the same standards, of course, for their specific area, that the data and the tools are interoperable. So there are lots of, let's say, just to mention an example, that's used a lot for historical text and history, it's TEI. TEI is an XML-based representation of text, which is adopted as a de facto standard by the communities who are working on that type of data. But of course, if you're coming with speech data, we have recommendations for how to encode your data in order to make sure that our tools can help you processing it. So we don't exclude anything, but the more you adhere to existing standards, the better chances there are that you can combine your data with other people's data or with other people's tools. No, we don't have a system. We are let's say more comparable with a library. A library of all sorts of types of data. They're all stored in the Clarion repositories. And we have also large collections of tools that can be used to process the data. But there is no single Clarion system. That doesn't exist. There's the Clarion technical infrastructure that connects all let's say, all the repositories. But basically, I think that's making use of all the facilities offered by organizations like Géant, but that's not a Clarion-specific thing. So it's not. No, I know that in let's say in language and speech technology, there are people who have developed their own systems that do things. Let's say speech recognizes, and there are very strong requirements on how you input your data, and you will be told what your output is. But that's not the case in Clarion. Clarion is open and free. You can do whatever you want. But as I said, we try to comply with the FAIR principle. So if you would like to deposit a tool or a system or an application in Clarion, we would ask you to make sure that it's interoperable and that it adheres to standards, let's say common standards. Okay.
So session 5 is closed.